My name is Amanda Barker, and I am the Clean Energy Program Coordinator here at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, which means that I help coordinate our programs. So we are a nonprofit organization that is based in both Boston, Massachusetts, and Providence, Rhode Island. And our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. And we do that through both programs and advocacy. So we have a program like our heat pump program, which I'll go into a little bit more about in a second. But we also have programs for electric vehicles, solar, essentially all of the green technologies that we are trying to transition to help out the climate. And we were founded in 1982, and we are a very consumer-focused organization, which I will talk a little bit more about in just a second. So now getting into some heat pump basics and a little bit more about our heat pump program. As I said, we are very consumer focused and we are very focused on this big transition that is moving our heating systems away from fossil fuel combustion and towards cleaner electric heating systems known as heat pumps. And we really want to help consumers find trusted vendors and sound advice. And in doing that, we're really looking to push the whole heat pump industry to be better by educating consumers. And if you're interested in learning more about our work and heat pumps, you can visit our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/heat pumps. And this is an active link for when we send out the slides later on. So what exactly is a heat pump? A heat pump uses the same technology as an air conditioner and refrigerator. A refrigerant is the key operator in all of these systems. And essentially what a refrigerant is, it's a highly temperature sensitive fluid or gas, depending on which state it's in or what temperature it's at. And this refrigerant can absorb heat out of temperatures as low as -50 degrees. And it can also generate heat as high as 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And with a heat pump, it's similar to a refrigerator or an air conditioner, but it runs in reverse. So it can take heat out of your house or it can put heat into your house. So it's able to toggle between providing both heating and cooling, which is really cool. And it's similar to these water pumps that we have pictured here, in that a water pump does not create water. It simply moves water from one place to another. Heat pump is very similar in that it captures the heat in that refrigerant, liquid, or gas that we talked about, and it pumps that refrigerant to another place, and then releases that heat in that new location. So it's just moving heat. It's not generating heat. And that is why a heat pump is so efficient, and it can achieve efficiencies greater than 100% because it is just moving the heat. It is not generating heat like fossil fuel-based heating systems do. So you may have heard that heat pumps are not efficient down to very cold temperatures. And while that was true in the past, it is no longer true in the present. Heat pump technology has significantly improved in recent years, and we now have cold climate heat pumps that can efficiently produce heat down to -17 degrees Fahrenheit. And there are many people in many cold climate states and countries that have completely replaced their fossil fuel heating systems with heat pumps, including in Maine, which is one of our coldest states in the nation. They have a very high adoption rate of heat pump technology. And heat pumps come in various different forms. There are ducted and ductless heat pumps. So ducted is when you distribute heat through existing ductwork in your house, or new ductwork if you're building a new home. And ductless is basically a heat pump without ducts. And that's what's depicted in this image here, where essentially there's a line connecting the outdoor unit to the inside head. You can also have a whole home or partial home heat pump. So you can choose to only convert part of your home to heat pumps, or you can use heat pumps to heat your entire home. And then there is an air source heat pump, which takes heat out of the air. And then there's a ground source heat pump, which takes heat from the ground. Now getting into the different ductless indoor variations, or also known as heads. Um, there are three different types. The first is a wall-hung unit, and this is the most common type of indoor heat pump. This can easily be hung on exterior walls without any furniture blocking the way. And it's also easy for technicians to access, so people tend to use this model the most. But there's also a floor mount unit, which looks a little bit more like a floor radiator, at least in location as to where it would sit. These are becoming increasingly popular and are a great alternative to the wall hung units, particularly for first floor heating. And for these, the refrigerant line can come in through the basement, so it can easily be placed in the middle of the home. And then the last type is ceiling cassettes, and these are mounted on your ceiling. They are most often installed from an attic level. And ceiling cassettes are a bit of a newer product that does a better job of fitting between joists in the ceiling. And there are also new options coming out all the time. Heat pumps are constantly evolving to make installation, more practical. Now to talk about the outside part of the heat pump, also known as the condenser. Condensers have a large fan, and so they need a free flow of air to be able to work properly. And so, because snow and ice might block airflow, the condenser does need to have a stand to keep it clear in the wintertime. The condenser does need to be close to the house for electricity and to run the refrigerant line outside the house to where the inside head is located. And the smaller condensers are roughly a foot thick and 2 feet high to about 3 feet wide. And the larger condensers pictured here in this image is for a whole home heat pump system. So these ones are for a larger system. So why is Green Energy Consumers so interested in educating people about heat pumps? The answer is that shifting our heating from fossil fuels to green powered electricity is essential. This chart here is from a 2021 data set from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. And you can see a comparison of the greenhouse gas emissions from heat pumps and other sources of heating. And you'll see that there are much fewer greenhouse gases emitted from air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps compared to oil, propane, natural gas, and electric baseboard heating. And we want to note that both electric baseboard and heat pumps run on electricity, but heat pumps are far more efficient because they use much less electricity and thus create much less greenhouse gas emissions. And as the electricity becomes cleaner, and in Rhode Island, we have a 100% renewable energy standard by 2033, which means that 100% of our electricity by 2033 must come from renewable sources. There are zero emissions from heat pumps. Whereas you can see that oil, propane, and natural gas will still produce emissions even when our grid is 100% clean. And so that is why states and utility companies are incentivizing heat pump conversions, because this is practically the only way to reduce emissions 100% from heating. Now to get into costs and incentives. So first, to talk about installation costs. When considering a switch to heat pumps, there are two costs to keep in mind. The first is the installation cost, and the second is operating costs. For installation costs, a very rough ballpark estimate for a single head ductless system after incentives is between $6,000 and $10,000. For a whole home ducted system, you'd be looking at roughly $15,000 to $25,000, and potentially more if you have big cathedral ceilings, or many bedrooms in your home. So this really is an estimate and can vary based on your home layout. Again, this is a ballpark estimate, and you really do need to have a technician come out to your house to actually find out the cost to install a heat pump in your specific home. In addition to the cost of the heat pump, a lot of people need to upgrade their electrical service as well to be able to install a heat pump. You most likely will need a 200 amp electrical service, and we have seen quotes for that to be between $6,000 and $9,000. But we will note that it is possible to install a heat pump, potentially possible with your current electrical service, and you really need to have an electrician come out and examine that for you in your specific instance. I also want to note that Rhode Island does have a heat loan program where qualified Rhode Island Energy customers can receive 0% financing to install qualified high efficiency heating and cooling upgrades in their homes. With regard to heat pumps, unfortunately, only a heat pump replacing electric baseboard resistance heat is eligible for this loan. But electric heat pump water heaters are eligible regardless of what you would be replacing. And then various energy efficiency measures are eligible for this loan. So this is an active link. If you click on it, it'll give you more details on what exactly is eligible, but a potential way to help cut down or help you out with installation costs. Now, to offset installation costs, there are federal tax credits. I do want to note that currently things are changing at the federal level with the new administration, and we cannot predict how long this tax credit is going to be available. But right now, the law currently states that this federal tax credit exists, and it's written to be available for the next 10 years. So that's, what the law says right now, but unfortunately there is some uncertainty around it. So we do want to note that. But with that caveat, right now for heat pumps and heat pump hot water heaters, there is a post incentive of 30% of the cost of the system up to $2,000. And for electrical upgrades, there is a $600 credit available. You can claim up to $3,200 worth of credits each year. And this can be a combination of different things. So, for example, you can get a $2,000 heat pump credit and then another credit for an energy efficiency measure like insulation, but you cannot exceed $3,200 in a single year. So, for example, you wouldn't be able to claim a $2,000 credit for a heat pump and then a $2,000 credit for a heat pump hot water heater in the same year, as that would exceed the $3,200 limit. Another thing to note is there is no rollover. So say 30% of your post-incentive cost is $6,000. You can't take $2,000 one year and then $2,000 the next year. You can only do it once. However, you can claim a new energy savings tax credit for a new piece of equipment every year for 10 years. So for example, you could do a heat pump one year, and then the next year you could do a heat pump hot water heater. And here we just have a link to the Internal Revenue Service that has more information on these tax credits. And then we also have a link to qualified equipment search, which will tell you what equipment is eligible for the tax credit. Great. Okay, so now we will move into some federally funded rebates for Rhode Island. I do want to note that right now, unfortunately, with the uncertainty at the federal level, with an executive order issued by Trump to essentially halt federal funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, this program is currently paused for applications. With that being said, it does appear to be illegal for him to just halt the funding that was obligated by Congress already. So I will note that several states are challenging that executive order. In addition to Rhode Island, our Attorney General is involved in a suit against that order. And so we are hoping for this funding to become available again and for the program to resume. But right now, unfortunately, it is paused. So we do want to note that, but we are still going to share information in hopes that it will reopen again soon. So with that being said, the Inflation Reduction Act allocated funds to two federally funded rebates. The first is the home electrification and appliance rebate. Rhode Island already launched this program for low and moderate income individuals. And so it was open and accepting applications up until last week when the executive order halted that. And what this program does is it issues point of sale rebates primarily for electrification measures. And right now it is limited to low and moderate income households. And Rhode Island was allocated $31 million for this program. The second program is the home efficiency rebate. Rhode Island has not yet been awarded this funding. They submitted their application to the Department of Energy and are still waiting to hear back. So there is some uncertainty around this program. But what this program would do is offer point of sale rebates for energy efficiency improvements that achieve a minimum of 20% energy savings. Rhode Island was allocated $32 million for this program, and they have submitted their proposal, which is public. And essentially, what they proposed is to create a low income, multifamily clean heat Rhode Island pathway, offering $16,000 per unit in hopes of completely covering the cost of installing a heat pump in low income multifamily units. So that was their proposal. And like I said, they are waiting for it to be approved. And again, we are unsure the status given the executive order. With that being said, like I said, Rhode Island did launch the initial low-income rebate pathway for the HERE program in September, and they are planning on launching the moderate income pathway in 2025. And essentially, this offers incentives for electric load service centers, so upgrading your electric system, electrical wiring, and as well as incentives for heat pump clothes dryers, electric stoves, induction cooktops, ranges, or ovens. And this incentive is allocated based on your income status. Right now, low and moderate income households are the only income eligible participant, and the income thresholds are determined by the area median income. And so this table shows the low and moderate income thresholds for a family of four in Rhode Island as of 2024. And we linked here the Department of Housing and Urban Development for more information on specific income thresholds. Rhode Island also has a low-income incentive program for heat pumps, but it does vary by fuel source, and the program manager varies by fuel source. So low income counts as a two-person household making under $46,651, or if you're on LIHEAP, SNAP, or the A60 rate, you are automatically eligible for the low-income discount. Now, if you are on oil or propane heat, the discount is going to come from the Clean Heat Rhode Island program, which is the state Office of Energy Resources administered program. And this program covers 100% of the cost of heat pump installation, as well as 100% of the cost of a heat pump water heater. And it also allocates up to $3,500 for electrical upgrades, should that be needed to install either a heat pump or a heat pump hot water heater. For electric resistance heat, if you have that and you are low income qualified, The program is through the utility, Rhode Island Energy, and it covers 100% of the cost of installing the heat pump, including weatherization. Unfortunately, for gas heat, if you are on gas heat and are low income, there is currently no incentive. And that is due to some of the economics of gas heat compared to heat pump operating costs, just because right now electricity rates in our region are more expensive than gas costs currently. So we want to make sure that we're not increasing anyone's energy burden by helping them install a heat pump. Now to go into the market rate incentive by fuel source. Again, this does vary by fuel source. And unfortunately, some of the programs are currently paused due to them being fully subscribed. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So right now, market rate, you are considered market rate if you are a two-person household making greater than $46,651. And if you are on oil, propane, or gas heat, there are rebates from both Clean Heat Rhode Island, which is the state program run by the Office of Energy Resources, as well as rebates from your utility. Unfortunately, rebates from Clean Heat Rhode Island, the state program, are currently paused due to the program being fully subscribed. The state is looking for a new funding source for this program, and we'll definitely keep you updated if applications do open up again. And we're certainly advocating for them to find new funding sources for this program. But right now, if you look at this table, the $750 per ton rebate for air source heat pumps and the $1,250 per ton rebate for ground source heat pumps are currently not accepting new applications. With that being said, the rest of the table, all of these incentives from the various different utilities in Rhode Island are still accepting new applications. So if you have Rhode Island Energy, you can still get $350 per ton off of the cost of a heat pump. If you have electric resistance heat, that program is run by Rhode Island Energy and is still active. So if you have electric resistance heat, Rhode Island Energy offers you an incentive of $1,250 per ton for displacing your electric resistance heating. Now to talk a bit more about heat pump water heaters. So heat pumps can also heat your water tank for showers, dishwashers, etc. And you probably heat your water now with a boiler or an electric resistance tank. And if you heat with an electric tank, Rhode Island Energy offers a $600 rebate for replacing that tank with a heat pump hot water heater. If you are replacing a gas, oil, or propane tank, again, there was the Clean Heat Rhode Island rebate, which again is the state program of $750. But like I said, this program is currently paused and not accepting new applications. Heat pump hot water heaters are 2 to 3 times more efficient than all other tank equipment, whether electric or fossil fuel. And heat pump water heaters work by pulling heat out of the air surrounding the tank. And because of this, they do need a large enough space. So they do need something typically bigger than a small utility closet to be able to work properly. And they do leave that space cooler and drier as a result. So, if it's in a basement, drier is probably a good thing. But if you do need heat in your basement or wherever the heat pump water heater is located, you do need to think about, ensuring that you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul there. Heat pump hot water heaters do require an electric hookup, and they also require a drain for the water vapor that condenses as the heat is being pulled out of the air. And there's a great heat pump hot water heater cost calculator that we've linked here on the slide from the Efficiency Maine website. So we do encourage you to check that out to help figure out your operating costs of a heat pump water heater. Now that we've talked a lot about the installation costs of heat pumps and what incentives are available to help mitigate those upfront costs, we're now going to switch gears and talk about operating costs of a heat pump. And when transitioning to heat pumps, your electric usage is going to increase, and your gas, oil, or propane usage, whatever you use to heat your home currently, is going to significantly reduce. And so to compare heating costs, there are three things that we want to look at. The first is weather. The second is efficiency of the equipment. And the third is fuel costs. So first looking at weather, this graph that you see here on the screen shows 10 years of heating season data from New England. The x-axis is temperature and the y-axis is hours of the heating season that you are at that temperature. So you'll see here that roughly 2,000 hours are at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and then roughly 2,500 hours are at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So this means that the majority of the winter, we're in that 30 to 60 degree temperature range. And then for 20 to 30% of the winter, we are experiencing colder temperatures. Now, heat pumps do lose some efficiency below freezing, but modern cold climate weather heat pumps are still 100% efficient down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are still more efficient than the best gas boiler or furnace. And they continue to provide heat at 75 to 85% efficiency, all the way down to negative 17 degrees Fahrenheit. And for some context, our area averages just 1 day a year when the mercury dips to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So fortunately for us, we spend about 70 to 80% of our heating season above freezing temperatures. And so this isn't really a major concern for us. But we do want to note that if you don't get the right equipment with cold climate technology, it can struggle to produce heat at colder temperatures. So with living in the New England climate, you do want to be sure to get a cold climate heat pump for that 20 to 30% of the winter where we are dealing with below freezing temperatures. Now let's look at fuel costs. So this graph here, the gray shows us that same weather data that we were just looking at on the previous slide. And the black line represents oil cost, the blue line represents gas costs, the green line represents air source heat pumps. And so as you can see, for the majority of the winter, air source heat pumps are going to be the most cost effective of the different fuel types. But as we get into the colder temperatures, gas can be more efficient. And in the really cold temperatures, oil can be more efficient, and even propane can be as efficient as heat pumps. So each home is different, and each home's electricity and fossil fuel prices are going to be different. So I want to be transparent about the costs and the cost assumptions that we've made here in this graph, because as they say with cars, your mileage may differ. So in this chart, we are using average historical annual fuel costs in Rhode Island, but fuel costs can vary by season. So we want you to think about, what you're paying for your fuel source, and then adjust in your mind what your cost benefit might be. I also want to make clear that the efficiency that we assume for the air source heat pump equipment here, I want to make that clear. So the COP, you'll see here in the top right corner, heat pump COP. COP stands for the coefficient of performance, which is the measure of efficiency for heat pumps. And so for each 1 kilowatt of electricity you put into this heat pump, you're going to get X kilowatts of heat out of it. So it's a tremendously efficient system, which is why it's so cost effective at these higher temperatures. And you will see that as the temperature decreases, it becomes less efficient. So at negative 15 degrees, it jumps down to 1.95 COP, which is actually still a really great COP. As if you think about a natural gas furnace, the highest cost that you're going to get is about 98%. So in that metric, it would be 0.98. So the heat pump is still twice as efficient in terms of its optimization of fuel, even at this very cold temperature. And that is why this is classified as a cold climate heat pump. So that was a lot of information, but overall, our main message here is that if you think about your current heating fuel, what the cost is now, and then think about 10 years out, what those costs are likely to be, that's probably the best thing to do to make your choice based on your heating fuel and what you pay. Now to get into some heat pump system design options. So we want you to think about your home specifically. Does it have ductwork or is it ductless? If you have ductwork, you probably have a furnace, not a boiler, and you've got ducts in the floor bringing you hot air. Hot air ductwork is relatively easy to reuse for a heat pump. You'd have a heat pump condenser outside, and you'd have an air handler in your basement using that same ductwork that already exists. And you would need to make sure that the ductwork is in good condition and can handle both cold air and hot air. And you may also be able to use central air conditioning ductwork for a heat pump, but you would need to have a technician come out to examine it and make sure that the ductwork, if it's currently sized for cold air, it can still be compatible with hot air from a heat pump. And so if you can do this, it's a great option because you'd be replacing two pieces of equipment, both your central air conditioning and furnace with one. Now, if your home lacks ductwork, basically you don't have a furnace and you have a boiler and you don't have central air conditioning, there isn't an easy drop-in heat pump replacement for your system. Heat pumps don't produce water that is hot enough to match the heat that is currently produced by your boiler. But if you have a very well insulated home, it actually is possible to replace your boiler with a heat pump because you don't need those radiators or your baseboard to get as hot thanks to your home having a very tight envelope. Hydronic options are in development and may become available or are available now and are continuing to improve. So that is an option that you could look into. However, you could use a ductless or a mini ducted system. So this would be a single head that can serve a larger open area like a great room. And you can have single zones or multi-zones. And a mini ducted unit can serve several small adjacent rooms. For example, say both a bedroom and an office. And we do want to remind you that you always want to insulate first to be sure to save on operating costs. Now let's talk about sizing your system. So one thing that we want to warn you against is oversizing. This has been a concern that has come up for people who have installed so far. So the heat load for this contemporary style home is 24,000 BTUs or British thermal units of heat per hour. And in this illustration, we've put one 24K head in the living room / dining area. This would provide enough heat to keep the house from freezing, similar to a wood stove. However, there would be a noticeable difference between rooms. For instance, these two back bedrooms would be colder than the main living area. The bedrooms would also be slightly warmer in the winter. And this may be fine for you. The bedrooms may be slightly warmer in the summer, but you could put ceiling fans in those bedrooms and be totally comfortable. But it's just something to note that there may be a temperature difference between the central area and the two back bedrooms. This could also only be a partial displacement of your fossil heating system. So you could have a heat pump in the main area and then move your thermostat to the hall or back bedroom and set those lower than the heat pump. So that is an option in this instance. Now, this is the sizing that we want to warn you about. Too many heads in a small space. Let's say that a contractor comes in and says, oh, your heat load is 24K, but you need to have a head in every room. I'm going to go ahead and put in 4 heads at 9,000 BTUs in each room. And that'll give you a max capacity of 26,000, which is more than you need, but it'll be fine because they'll just run less. This would be a problem because you've now got 33% more than what you need. The problem with this is that the heat pump systems are designed to run continuously, not on and off. And so this system would be very inefficient. In the summer, you'd end up with cold and clammy air. The dehumidification cycle takes longer than the cooling cycle. So the air will not be dehumidified, but it will be cold. So too many heads in a small space will be not only more expensive because you're paying for more equipment than you need, but it's also, more expensive to operate, and the comfort level is not going to be there as well. So we definitely recommend avoiding oversizing and putting a head in every room in a layout like this. Now, a potential solution for smaller bedrooms that are adjacent to each other is a mini ducted system. So what you would do is you put an air handler in the attic above or the basement below, and you put a tiny 3 to 6 foot ductwork line into each room. And so in this illustration, you've got 12,000 British thermal units that are split between the 2 bedrooms. And each bedroom is getting 6,000 BTUs, and that's perfect. They are going to be nice and comfortable. And these two can be connected, or they can be 2 separate condensers, or just connected to one condenser. Generally, a condenser works most efficiently when it has fewer heads on it, but you can actually put up to four or so heads on one condenser. And heads can be up to 150 feet per condenser. And then, so that covers the 2 back bedrooms. And to heat the main living area, you can have a 12,000 British thermal unit head to cover the rest of the main living space there. So as a next step, we highly recommend the no-cost virtual independent consultations that you can book with Clean Heat Rhode Island and Energy Sage. I will note that while the incentives are paused with Clean Heat Rhode Island, they are still offering these consultation services and heat pump quote comparison services. So, this is a big deal. You're talking about spending thousands of dollars on a heat pump, and heat pump configurations can be so varied. And, you may get quotes with very different designs from different contractors. So we definitely recommend taking advantage of these free consultations and this free quote comparison process, so that you really dive in and understand what you're being offered. To say a bit more about the Clean Heat Rhode Island quote comparison tool, they will offer you side-by-side comparisons of up to 3 quotes, and they offer you independent feedback. So let's say, you get one quote that has higher efficiency equipment, and that's why it's more expensive, but your operating costs are going to be lower compared to this other quote who, might look more expensive up front, but your operating costs are actually going to be higher. So they'll help you break that down and provide clear explanations to what is often pretty technical information. So definitely recommend checking this out, and we really feel like it's a game changer for consumers. And this link will take you to the website that'll allow you to access the free quote tool. So before we open it up for Q&A, we do just want to leave you with three key questions that we recommend asking heat pump installers if you are planning to move forward in the process. The first is your company one of the approved installers for my state or utility heat pump rebate program? This is very important as not all of them are approved. So you do want to ensure that you're moving forward with an installer that you'll be able to actually access the rebate from. The second is, will you formally calculate my heat load before I sign a contract to purchase specific pieces of equipment? And the third is the equipment you're recommending eligible for the state slash municipal rebate? So definitely recommend asking these three questions to make sure that you are getting a heat pump that is covered by these rebates. Lastly, I do just want to note that there has been a refrigerant update. This is a requirement on manufacturers, not consumers. So it's not necessarily something that you need to worry about, but you may have heard about it. And so I wanted to address it. So basically, in 2020, the AIM Act was passed by Congress, which mandates a 700 global warming potential limit for all new HVAC systems. So this has caused HVAC manufacturers to replace their current refrigerant that they're using, which is typically R410A, with refrigerants that have a lower global warming potential. And so those are going to be R454B and or R432 to comply with these new regulations. And the phase out deadline was January 1st of this year. So all new equipment is going to be built with these lower GWP refrigerants. However, you can still buy equipment that is already on the market that has the former refrigerant. But this is good news. This is good for the environment as it ensures that new refrigerant systems have a lower GWP, which helps reduce any impact on the climate. So just wanted to update you on that. And before we go to closing and questions, I do just want to note that we are a nonprofit organization. So if you feel so inclined to donate, we would greatly appreciate it. It does help fund webinars like this one, as well as our advocacy department, where we advocate for climate policies and policies to help ensure that things like heat pumps are accessible to everyone. So we would really appreciate any donations, and you can go to this link listed on the slide if you would like to donate. With that, we will now open it up to questions. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will go to the Q&A to see if we have any questions. All right, it looks like Daryl is asking, what is the current Rhode Island Energy rebate for installing a hybrid hot water tank heat pump that was previously heating and cooling with oil? What is the current Rhode Island Energy rebate for installing? Let me pull up my slide again. I believe it is $750 per ton. So it would depend on how many tons of heating your system is, and then you would multiply it by $750 per ton. Is that your understanding, Loie?
Daryl, we just need a little clarification, I think. You talk about a hybrid hot water tank heat pump, and I'm assuming you're talking about this is a water heating tank that was being powered by the oil boiler in the past. Yes, water heating. Yeah. So the water heating rebate, Amanda, was that $600 for a hot water uh, for a heat pump water tank?
That's correct. Yep. It's $600 from Rhode Island Energy, or it was $750 from Clean Heat Rhode Island, but unfortunately that's the program that is paused right now. And I see Loie has been doing a great job of answering a lot of the questions that have been coming in throughout the presentation. Um, if you do have a question, feel free to enter it into the Q&A now, and we will do our best to get to it.
Oh, congratulations, Jill, that you were able to claim the Clean Heat Rhode Island rebate before it got paused. That's great.
Awesome. All right, let's see.
Yeah, John is asking about smart panels. These are electrical panels that have controls on them that monitor how much electricity is being drawn for various things. So, for instance, you may have an EV charger, you may have a battery storage pack, you may have solar panels that are feeding in, electricity at some times of the day and not at other times. You may have an induction cooktop. You may have a heat pump, clothes washer dryer. All of those things. The smart panel can monitor how much is being pulled by those various things. And it's also monitoring your heat pump heating system. And if your heating system says, I need power now, it can actually turn off your EV charger if your EV charger happens to be running. And then once the heating need has passed, the house has gotten up to temperature and it's just fine again, then the EV charger comes on. And John was asking, do we know Rhode Island contractors who are capable of just doing any kind of electrical service upgrades, and in particular, installing the smart panels? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, we don't have information on electricians and their capabilities. We certainly welcome anyone contacting us and letting us know, oh yes, Betty Smith installed my smart panel. I had a good experience with Betty. We can definitely note those um, that information, and then as we have capability, perhaps we could reach out to, if somebody said, Betty, John, and Jamal are all great doing these smart panels, then perhaps we could create a webinar where we had Betty, John, and Jamal making presentations about what smart panels are, et cetera, et cetera. But unfortunately, that does seem to be a bit in the future as the whole electricians availability is really constrained right now. We need more people to become electricians, and we need people to get experience installing heat pumps and the electrical upgrades and the smart panels that will make this whole transition a lot smoother.
Great. And then I see a question from Jesse about how do we know if contractors are knowledgeable about heat pumps? That is a great question and certainly a concern that we've had pop up. Um, I will note that the Clean Heat Rhode Island program does have a list of verified installers that at least have agreed to participate in the incentive program and are aware of the incentives. So that list that Clean Heat Rhode Island has on their website is definitely a good place to start in terms of um, installers that are at least aware and knowledgeable on the incentives that are available through the state.
Yeah, and you can certainly ask them point blank, how many um, units have you installed of this type of equipment that you're recommending? Why do you recommend this size rather than one that's smaller or larger? Get them, try to elicit more in-depth conversation with them about that. You can also look up on any of the manufacturers' sites. Say you can go to the Mitsubishi site and say, I want to know about, this Rhode Island heat pump installer, Smith Electrical or Smith HVAC or whatever. You can see if they're listed by that contractor. Of course, you want them to be listed because that certifies that they've gone through the training with Mitsubishi or whoever the manufacturer is you're looking at. And they'll also tell you the level of experience that that person has. They usually indicate that with some sort of metric like, preferred or gold versus platinum versus silver. So they'll have a ranking system, and the higher the rank means that they are more experienced. It's basically based on units sold, I think, in most cases. So the higher the ranking is with the manufacturer, the more experienced they are, or the more training that they've gone through.
Great. All right. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. Maybe I'll give it a couple more seconds to see if any pop in, but if not, we will give everyone 4 minutes back. All right. Looks like we aren't getting any more questions, so really appreciate everyone's time and thank you so much for joining. As I said, we will be sending out this recording along with the slides and any follow-up resources to the email that you registered with. So definitely be on the lookout for that and have a great rest of your day.
Bye bye all.
Thanks. Bye.